Welcome to the Brevis Consulting, Living and Learning podcast. Now to your host, Shivraj Prashad.
I am so happy that you've chosen to join me today. As founder of Brevis, I work with a whole host of exciting folks and together have the privilege of serving companies, leaders and institutions across sectors and geographies in order to enhance their learning culture.
I've been feeling so locked inside. I've been sitting at home and worrying all night. I've been sitting all that night. And I've been worrying, well, everything's gonna be alright. But I can see you.
I could almost get lost in the lilting sound of that tune. Now, that's a song written and composed during this time of lockdown by my friend Sharif Rangnekar. Sharif, thank you so much for speaking to me on the Brevis Living and Learning podcast.
Thank you for having me, Shivraj. I think this is fantastic what you're doing. Much needed now and generally needed, I think, anyway.
So typically I would ask my podcast guests to turn down the sound when we speak, but clearly music and the creative arts are your companion, or shall I say soundtrack to your life at a time like this?
Totally. It's very much connected. I just can't see or imagine a day without music around me. So I pretty much start the day in the morning with music playing in the house because it just makes it easier both for my mom and me to have something going on in the background rather than our own voices.
So the real catalyst for this conversation, Sharif, is the track that I teased just now, See You on the Other Side of Corona. What is the genesis of that composition?
Well, Shivraj, it came from, firstly, thanks for sharing it with other people. It really came from a place of anxiety and paranoia. It wasn't like I sat down and thought that, okay, I have to do a song, and it wasn't like in complete isolation of what was happening around me. I'm sure a lot of us have senior citizens at home. Like I have my mom, I don't like to call her a senior citizen, but she is. And she has respiratory problem. So I've been petrified with all this COVID-19 stuff. And I was also very scared that, we still had, till a certain day, had help coming home. This is before lockdown. So until there was a decision at home that there's going to be no one coming at home, I couldn't sleep. And the moment we had decided that, I felt so much more relaxed. I had this tune in my mind and I just wanted to tell everyone that somehow or the other we have to overcome this. So that's where it really came from. So somehow it turned out to be a kind of a calming, easy song. I sang on the go.
And that's just about it, Sharif. You've worn so many hats: journalist, publishing, heading a communication and advocacy firm, then music composer, lead singer of the band Friends of Linga, curator of arts, culture and advocacy event Embrace, author and festival director for India's first LGBTQ Rainbow Lit Fest. If I were dare to ask, what would you say most defines you?
I think at the end of the day, I'm a communicator because I think one thing that's in common trait across everything that I've done has been communication. But I think I've tried to use communication as a means to advocate certain things, certain rights, certain thoughts, that come to me and then share it with others. So I think that's been something along the journey. And I think that's what's core, what's at the center, to tell stories.
So Sharif, I've known you for over 20 years and you've been somewhat of a very passionate person. And the one thing I've always seen as your superpower is the ability to take any issue, get to the core of it, and that's what you were just referring to, and creatively turn it into something everyone can relate to. Is that a valid characterization of what you do and who you are?
Yeah, maybe I think you're right, Shivraj, because I've never really thought of myself, of who and what, because a lot of these things are instinctive. I mean, even the song you're talking about was instinctive. It was sitting in my head. What I felt, I just put out at that moment. So I think I've used video, I've used audio, writing, and I think maybe you know me better.
No, and there's this whole phenomenon I've been reading about, and of course, this time gives you a lot of opportunity to
Yeah.
delve very deep into thinking. And of course, the one thing that you've dealt with a lot is loss and stress. And there's an whole notion of playful mindset where sometimes the creative arts, the avenues of music, of taking time off. It's almost like when you work out in the gym and you tire muscles, you need that time out to become stronger and be able to cope with what life offers you. I think a lot of your creative journey is linked to that, isn't it?
It's definitely there because I don't think, if you've noticed, I've hardly ever written love songs per se. I think many people are writing it. I'm not averse to love songs. I write very limited love songs, maybe because I'm influenced by Bob Dylan as such, or a John Lennon. I mean, their outlook to life. It gives you a lot of satisfaction, deep down with that you've been able to share. Because I'm sure, just like Shivraj, when you interview so many people, you've been doing that for donkey's years, actually. At every point, the questions that you raise are also coming from within you, the things that you want to find out. And at the same time, then you go and share it. So I think for me, it's been always that finding out things and sharing it, because I'm sure there are many people as ignorant as me before I ask those questions. I think that sharing part gives me a lot of relaxation. It takes me away from other issues, day-to-day things that bother a person or stress was one out. But now I would say in the last 3 years since I moved out of a 9 to 5 scene, more of my focus and energy has been towards advocacy, towards using music or creating events that bring a variety of people together so that we can share. I'm a little less stressed now.
Sharif, you are someone who's also an observer of life, and I've seen that in your writing, like you said, it isn't about just writing love songs, is it right? It's about advocating and looking at larger issues. We've seen a global phenomenon now of artists and creative folks taking to the digital medium to soldier on, despite, of course, all their events and awards going on hold, often to fundraise for very frontline issues. Do you think that is the way forward for the creative arts now?
Yeah, I think the creative arts has always had the ability to say things that are not said in the mainstream to start with. Come to the fore when things are down for everyone. It's very sad that actually the creative arts doesn't always get the kind of respect it needs to under normal circumstances. But you've seen in the past when we had issues of droughts and poverty and starvation in Ethiopia, etc. And there was a band-aid which came in, with Sir Bob Geldof out of UK. You've seen, even in India, during the earthquakes at Latur, etc., you've seen Jagjit Singh, Gulzar, and various other people come forth. And they're not necessarily very, very commercial artists in the same way as, let's say, a Bollywood star. But they've always done that. And today, as you're pointing out, I think because music itself is so calming, poetry itself can connect with a certain emotion, it kind of has a way of drawing people in, giving them a sense of calm at a time where there's just so much that's bothering you or disturbing you. And that's a great way to provide something to people, give them that little bit of a balm, but at the same time tell them that, hey man, there are a set of people, there are nations which require help, there are minorities that require help. It kind of brings in people and appeals to their consciousness because there's a softness in that communication. There isn't that kind of commerce around that always makes you think that there's a business behind raising funds, but there isn't when it comes to an artist. And I think that's how we so often have managed to raise funds. And we're seeing independent Indian artists who are doing that, who are going online in Instagram and raising funds for a certain state or certain village. We've seen that internationally also in the case of what Lady Gaga just recently did with so many other artists. It's always giving.
Yeah. I actually read a very interesting meme, is that what you call it, online?
Yeah.
Where a renowned film director said at times like this, everyone's watching shows and films on the streaming sites. They're listening to music, they're listening to podcasts, and also consuming art and exhibitions online. And what the meme said is, hope they will finally give artists and creators their due when all of this is over. Now, finance and sustainability have always been an issue. Do you think, ironically, we've come full circle that when we get out on the other side, art and music and the creators of all that wonderful art and music will get their due?
Listen, I'll be very honest. I don't want to sound extremely skeptical about how people behave. But I think if we see a renaissance, if we see what happened several centuries ago after a plague. If we see something like that happen in terms of how people behave and how people consume, then perhaps the arts would get a lot more respect, a lot more funds, so that artists can sustain their lives. Very tough for people who are only doing music or only doing art. It's extremely tough.
And that brings me to the next question, Sharif. Are you in touch with your band members and your creative networks? What's next for them? What are they saying? What's happening?
Well, I think, I'm very much in touch with my band members as well as other artists. Well, they're worried that maybe a few months down the line, will there be any work? Will some of the schools that they're teaching at still keep them and retain them? Will students that they have still pay them? And I think the biggest problem is going to be no gigs, no venues available, because I don't know how many people would like to gather in an audience even 5 months down the line. That's at the back of their mind. The great thing about artists like the ones I know is they're still creating music. They're not giving up hope. They still hold on to their guitars and drums and keyboards, etc., and are perpetually trying to think of new ideas. They're waiting for everything to normalize. They're amazing people. They've got resilience, which I think many others won't have or don't have.
And finally, you touched upon a nerve, the fact that people are picking up their guitars, they're using music to calm them. Tell listeners, what would be your top tips to tide over this time, this very uncertain time, using the creative arts, or at least consuming them?
Music, definitely. If you're sketching and you used to sketch as a kid, just try it again and see what you can create. If you're into painting, try and paint again. If you write poetry, just what comes to your mind. Because remember one thing is, even when you do food, when you create anything that's from your hands is usually from your heart. It's your expression, and never lose your expression. And this is the greatest time for you to kind of connect with how you look at the world. Don't wait for an audience. And I just want to leave people with this one thing. John Lennon once said that one of the most beautiful sights and the most artistic moments in life every day is the sunrise and the sunset. But when it comes to the sunrise, it's strange that there is no audience because most of us are sleeping, but the sun continues to do that and create that sunrise every morning, no matter who's awake, who's asleep. So that's the great thing about art, and I think explore it, because you're going to feel great, because it's really personal, it's really intimate, it's you, it's an extension of you.
Sharif Rangnekar, even as I thank you for speaking to the Brevis Living and Learning podcast, could you leave us with a strain of your creative superpower, a limerick, a tune, or even a song?
I wrote something just a few days ago. So this is really about artists, it's about music, it's about the questions you raise. It's a poem, so we're going to turn it into a song. The gift of lines and the gift of words, the gift of voices that you've never heard. Gift of song, however long, lies in independence, else the freedom's gone. That's all right.
As a public communications trainer, I sometimes find it exhilarating to dig deep, research already established wisdom, speak to experts and thought leaders, to turn it all into my very own gold dust to help you.
Making a will in India is the most important thing you can do at this critical time.
Next week, we speak to dual qualified lawyer Sanam Singh on preparing for the afterlife, making wills and beyond. I hope these conversations have helped you in any way. If you have any questions, inputs, ideas, or would just like to connect with me or anyone in my network, shout out by writing into me at shivraj@brevis.in. And don't forget to either follow or subscribe by searching for the Brevis Living and Learning podcast on Spotify or Apple Podcasts.
Just stay safe and be clean, 'cause I can see you on the other side, and I see you on the other side.